Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Ixia's latest and greatest network visibility webinar, SD-WAN, Achieving High-Quality User Experience with Hawkeye. We're glad you could join us today, and hope you'll find today's presentation both insightful and entertaining. So without further ado, let's meet today's speakers. My name's Mike Hodge, and I'm a product marketer for Ixia. As you can see, I've got a face for radio and a voice to match, so I'll be your host for today's webinar and lead the deep technical discussion to a couple of people who are way smarter than I am. Speaking of which, joining me today are Joe Giegel, a Senior IT Systems Architect at Keysight Technologies, and Nicolas Ribault, a Senior Product Manager for Ixia. They'll be delivering the bulk of today's presentation, and you'll be hearing more from them in just a few short minutes. Now let's talk about today's agenda. I'm going to kick things off with a very short introduction to SD-WAN. Now I'm assuming that most of you already have a firm grasp on this, so I'll simply be giving a brief overview of the state of the industry, along with discussing a few key challenges that companies are facing when migrating to SD-WAN. From there, I'm going to hand things over to Nicolas, who will dive a little bit deeper into SD-WAN and its challenges, along with introducing Hawkeye, Ixia's active network monitoring platform. After that, Joe's going to take over and discuss Keysight's migration to SD-WAN, detailing the real-world problems that they faced, as well as the solutions they employed to overcome them. Finally, we'll circle back to both of our presenters and discuss their key takeaways and do a little bit of Q&A. So let's get started. So what is SD-WAN? Well, in its simplest form, it's a software-based approach to managing wide area networks. In the past, WAN connections often required fixed circuits or proprietary hardware, which were expensive to employ, difficult to set up, and not cloud-friendly. However, SD-WANs, also known as software-defined wide area networks, utilize software to simplify that management and increase scale. With support for zero-touch provisioning, multiple connection types, dynamic path selection, and increased security through VPNs, SD-WAN offers compelling promise to companies of all sizes. But for all its significant benefits, at the end of the day, the real allure of SD-WAN boils down to two key factors: agility and cost savings. Naturally, agility and cost savings offer an incredible incentive to switch, and as this graph shows, companies are doing just that. In fact, by some forecasts, the market will be worth almost $10 billion in just 3 short years. But that's not the only factor driving SD-WAN's rapid rise. Cloud and software as a service adoption are skyrocketing worldwide, and as enterprises increasingly embrace these technologies, SD-WAN will continue to be pursued as a key strategic initiative. Now let's dig in a little deeper on cloud from a WAN perspective, because it requires more than just bandwidth. At the moment, almost half of WAN traffic is currently coming from public clouds, and 84% expect that number to grow over the next 3 years. And while a majority of companies prefer to connect directly to their clouds, traditional wide area networks faced a host of challenges when doing so, making SD-WAN an ideal choice for today's cloud-centric networks. With strong business drivers fueling migration, it shouldn't surprise you that 97% of enterprises are engaged with SD-WAN in some form or another. Yet despite that, just 28% have fully transitioned, which shows how relatively immature SD-WAN is from a technological standpoint. And as you can expect with any technology that hasn't yet reached its inflection point, SD-WAN's benefits aren't without some growing pains as well. While an enterprise can expect lower network TCO and improved scalability, agility, cloud compatibility, branch connectivity, and distributed network performance, issues with security gaps, integration with legacy technology, complex traffic engineering, and a lack of SLAs can be tough pills to swallow. That last bullet there is particularly noteworthy, as performance problems and negatively impacted user experiences can completely undermine the cost and agility benefits that make SD-WAN so desirable in the first place. So naturally, this raises a fundamental question. When business depends upon the network, how do we maintain peak performance? And to answer that question, I'm going to hand things over to Nicolas Ribault. He's an expert on SD-WAN and network performance monitoring, and is going to discuss how Ixia Hawkeye can help you get the most out of your SD-WAN migration by safeguarding your user experience.
So Mike, thank you very much. That was a great introduction to SD-WAN and the challenges. So what I'm going to cover is how we can help with Ixia products to overcome these challenges, and in particular, how we're going to help meeting the great user experience that you're expecting when you're moving over to SD-WAN. So let me start with a recap on the challenges that Mike already covered, but maybe focus a bit more on the ones that we are going to address today. So one is really when you're moving to SD-WAN, you're going to switch over from MPLS either partially or completely to go to service provider circuits. And that means that you're going to lose some of the QoS overlay that you had with the MPLS and all the SLA service level agreements that you had. And for critical time-based application like voice, video, it's going to be a challenge. The second one is really about these service provider circuits that you get. So MPLS, as I said, usually come with service level agreements. These service level agreements are not there when you switch over to internet transport. Internet doesn't have, by definition, any quality of service implemented in its core. So you're going to have to really make sure that first your access is really meeting your key requirements. But even from an end-to-end perspective, because it's transported over internet for part of the traffic, you're going to have some challenges to really monitor and make sure your SLA are met. And then one of the key things is the migration of SD-WAN is usually coming together with also migrating your application to software as a service, or what I would say is in the cloud. Like your application are going to migrate from your data center to the cloud, and maintaining the key performance indicators for this cloud-based application is going to be a challenge as well. So at the core of any network services, the network is just a mean to an end. Like the network for your end users is just a way that they're getting connected to their services. So they see applications. They don't see a network. They see they're using the CRM day to day. They see or they hear voice, and they see how the video is transported, or conference calls, quality of them, and how quick they can get access to them. So all of that network is one essential piece of the equation in terms of quality of experience for the end users. So one of the key things when you transition to SD-WAN, like any big network transformation, is that you want to maintain and possibly improve your end user experience. And to do that, what we really help with is defining key metric indicators. So key metrics that will allow you to have some objective measurement of this quality of experience. So transform like, oh, my application is slow, or my voice is not coming through, in terms of network performance metrics like a response time, like packet loss, like jitter, like a mean opinion score on a voice call, that will give you all these metrics that you need to assess your network in terms of quality of service and quality of experience for the end user. So we do call these metrics KPIs. So this is key performance indicators. That will give you the network performance in terms of mapping it to end user experience. So this is a thing that we will provide as a in a dashboard. And what we really strongly recommend is to have these KPI checks at every stages of your implementation. So when you're going to SD-WAN, it's going to be a transition from your legacy network, the traditional one, to a new architecture that is going to have a lot of changes in terms of transport layers, in terms of how you access to the remote site, in terms as well of how you access to the application servers, because as I said, like it all, often comes with moving your application from your traditional data center to cloud or hybrid clouds. So when you do that, there will be different phases at which our tools will help to provide these KPIs and measure them and assess your performance at every stage. So the first one will be designing your architectures. So often, like selecting vendors, selecting architectures, selecting equipment, depending on the size of the sites. And we will provide tools that allow you to make the right decisions in terms of which design you're going to adopt. And then when you move into implementation phase and you're going to deploy everything in the network, before you turn users on this new architecture and go fully in production for it, we also recommend doing another assessment, like it's more like a live assessment, and make sure that your network is ready before you switch over. So again, measuring these KPIs and making sure that whatever you design is actually a reality in the live network, and more often than not, it's not day one. So it helps you to make the right changes in the live network before you actually switch over. And then you're going to move to production. So you're going to switch over your users to your new architecture. And again, we're going to help with providing all the KPIs more in a monitoring mode. So providing you these KPIs and see how you're doing day to day, 24/7, and be proactive at giving you indications when you have problems or issues with your end user experience. The tool we're going to use to do that is called Hawkeye. So this is a traffic generator in the heart. So it's what we call an active monitoring solution or synthetic monitoring solution. What it does, it emulates traffic, and it mimics really the end user behavior on the network. And by placing some endpoints or agents that are generating traffic where the end users are actually sitting. So from the branch side to the data center, for example, and we'll come back to it. And what we want to do with this tool is be as realistic as possible on the type of traffic that the end users are going to generate. It's not the same to do a lot of voice calls and calls to cloud applications and download from FTP sites than maybe some other user traffic profiles where they're watching videos and etc. So there are many different ways you can use a network, and we try to be as close as possible by mimicking the same behavior of the traffic. And of course, you can adapt your simulations to the type of traffic you're expecting your users to do. And with that, we can monitor your transition, so help you in the different phases that I outlined before on the previous slide. And we can also help with new application rollout. Like, as I said, during your SD-WAN transition, you're going to switch over to Office 365 maybe, and you're also going to implement new voice services, maybe transition over to Skype for Business or some other unified communication services. So we can, with Hawkeye tool, we can simulate all these things and help you to assess your network, not only for the SD-WAN part, but also for the new application rollout parts. And we can also as well test your traffic going to the cloud, and whether it's public or private, we have different ways to emulate traffic reaching out cloud applications that can be part of all this simulation. So this is covering a very high-level perspective on how you deploy Hawkeye into a network. What you see in the map of the world is really representing a network with multi-sites. So it can be a country, it can be intercontinental, as it shows there. And what is going to happen is you're going to have different sites connected together in your WAN, also accessing public cloud resources or even the Internet, like services on the Internet. That you see represented in the cloud. So what we're going to do is going to dispatch endpoints, what we call endpoints. These are software or hardware. I will get back to it. And then generate traffic into between these endpoints to mimic user behavior. And with that, we're going to emulate this traffic with some specific patterns that are going to be realistic and be able to provide you some key performance indicator. How is my traffic doing? And how is it performing to access applications, to go site to site, and measuring all these metrics that you care about to render a very good end user experience. So in terms of endpoints deployment, we we pay a lot of attention to that because that's really at the core of our product. We want that to be as easy and as cost-effective as possible. So we have a lot of options. Most of them are software-related. So we see a lot of our software endpoints being deployed because they're easy to place at the remote sites and very cost-effective. We have virtual solution containers, and I think Joe in this presentation will explain how we deploy these endpoints. But we also have, for those sites that don't have easy way to deploy either software, virtual endpoints, we have hardware options so that we can really cover any types of remote sites with our endpoint deployment. Now let's take a look. How does it look like when you're deploying your SD-WAN environment? So at the first phase, you're going to have put together your architecture into the field. And there you're going to place your SD-WAN gateway. You're going to configure your traffic rules and profiles. And what we're going to do with Hawkeye is place these endpoints into the different locations where you are delivering an SD-WAN service. So you can see it can be a remote site, it can be an enterprise branch, it can be an enterprise data center. It can also be a cloud resource. So we have ways to deploy our endpoints into public cloud as well as private clouds. And then we're going to emulate traffic between these endpoints. So we're going to test the capacity of transporting the traffic between these endpoints, and we can also test from an endpoint to a service like Salesforce.com or 365. So we can emulate any types of scenarios and really do a dry run of the network before you switch your real users on it. So in this phase, you're going to discover problems if there are some, like your service provider didn't provide you enough bandwidth, or you have a bottleneck reaching a cloud resource from a specific site, or any other implementation-related items that would be difficult to discover with end-user feedback. All these objective metrics that we're going to provide are going to give you all this information, and you can fix before you roll out completely to production. Now, once you do that, you're going to switch over to full production. Your network is ready, and then you're going to operate your SD-WAN infrastructure, and now it's switched over to operation team that needs to be able to monitor and fix issues when they come. So how does it work then? Well, the good thing is whatever you deployed in your, I would say pre-production or service readiness assessment phase, you can reuse exactly the same technology. So the same Hawkeye endpoints will be dispatched into the different sites, and you can change the way you use them to send what I call heartbeats. So you're going to send key transactions that are minimum. You don't want to create too much traffic. You don't want to overload your network, but you want to generate the significant traffic from time to time so that you can assess if your network is still operating correctly. So, for example, one voice call every 5 minutes between each and any sites, and it will give you the data points that you need to decide if your network is still providing a good service or not. So you keep doing that, and we provide all the nice dashboards and reporting and alerting services around that makes the tool a monitoring solution based on active traffic generation.
All right, thank you, Nicolas. That was great. See what I mean about how smart these guys are? Now, that was a great technical discussion, but it was largely theoretical. And as great as something can sound in a vacuum, nothing beats the gory details of a real-world case study. That's why Joe Giegel is going to take over from here and talk about Keysight's SD-WAN migration. Keysight was an early adopter of SD-WAN, and Joe was on the front lines for the entirety of the project, from inception to completion. So without further ado, take it away, Joe.
Thanks, Mike, for that introduction. Keysight started its journey to SD-WAN in early 2016 and recently completed the project towards the end of 2018. Our original goals were to significantly reduce the cost of our WAN service while greatly increasing site connection bandwidth at the same time. And while this was happening, Keysight was moving a number of common business and collaboration applications to software as a service, making connectivity to the public internet just that much more critical. We moved from a fairly stable, though pretty expensive, global MPLS network and Cisco routers to ISP circuits from 3 global Tier 1 ISPs and SD-WAN routers from Viptela, now owned by Cisco. Over the course of our project, we migrated over 100 sites to SD-WAN and eliminated MPLS from nearly all transit connections, the only exception being China and India, where country firewalls or telecom policies prevented total elimination of MPLS for us. Along the way, we endeavored to maintain quality of service for our critical real-time services like voice and video, and also struggled mightily with qualifying ISP circuits to contracted bandwidth and latency, and always kept an eye on how we were impacting critical SaaS applications like Salesforce or SuccessFactors, and certainly Microsoft's O365, which we moved to a few years back. In the second half of our journey, Keysight purchased Ixia, which was a triggering opportunity for us to evaluate and deploy Hawkeye to assist us with monitoring key attributes of our new SD-WAN service. This map shows Keysight's worldwide offices at a glance. With locations all over the globe, rolling out SD-WAN and ensuring good performance wasn't trivial. Having additional tools in our arsenal like Hawkeye are a huge help. Monitoring network performance from a central location is effective for up-down status, but doesn't adequately indicate what the end-user experience is when WAN circuits become impaired but are still up. Distributed probes with Hawkeye enable that visibility. Far better to have Hawkeye indicate a potential problem and then have our operations team fix it before the end users ever notice. In our first use case for Hawkeye, we're implementing its capability to generate synthetic voice calls to act as an early indicator of circuit problems that could be impacting the real-time voice service we provide to our end users. We've deployed both virtual and physical Hawkeye probes at Keysight's 25 largest, most critical locations, and have configured Hawkeye to run a full mesh synthetic voice test every 5 minutes. That's 600 plus test calls every 5 minutes. We get stats on things like MOS scores, jitter, latency, etc., that help us to see if we need to dig deeper with our other network monitoring tools to engage our ISPs with circuit problems. Our ultimate goal is to use these tests to identify problems before our end users have to raise a support ticket with our help desk. With all the global locations that were in scope for the migration project, we had to qualify well over 100 new ISP circuits for contracted bandwidth, latency, and loss. We tried using publicly available tools like speedtest.net, but found the results to be pretty inconsistent. Our future plan is to leverage Hawkeye's virtual probe capability to stand up probes at new sites and then collect metrics against existing probes in our environment, or to regional virtual probes in AWS. This is a work in progress for us in Keysight IT. Again, the distributed capability of Hawkeye will enable Keysight IT to monitor through synthetic transactions the end-user experience for key SaaS applications like Salesforce, Microsoft's O365, and even our own Keysight.com website. The challenge we face with our current monitoring toolset is that they are largely centralized and can only measure user experience to that central location. We're currently configuring Hawkeye to perform synthetic transactions for Salesforce and O365, which includes both SharePoint and email, and eventually our Keysight.com web presence, using those 25 distributed probes that we've already deployed. Having a monitoring tool like Hawkeye that more closely represents our end-user experience will help us in Keysight IT gain visibility that we've never had before. While there's still a place for monitoring tools that collect raw networking metrics and monitor device up-down state, being able to see what our Keysight employees are seeing at the application or service layer helps us gain valuable insights into where our IT services are failing to meet their expectations.
All right, thank you, Joe. That was brilliant. Now, that concludes the main briefing of today's webinar. So we're going to start wrapping up by summarizing some key points and doing a little bit of Q&A. But I've got to admit, I've always found traditional conclusion slides to be pretty boring. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. Since our two presenters have done such a great job, let's see what they think you should be taking away from today's webinar. Nicolas and Joe, the floor is yours.
Yes, so I think one of the key things I would like to outline is that we all hear about all this digital transformation and how it's affecting all the businesses in a good way. So really, I think any business really needs to adapt and make the best use of all the digital tools that are out there, whether it's from the cloud, whether it's IoT, whether it's all these new services that you find, and be more agile. And the network is really a foundation for that, because what they have in common, it's all based on more communication. And the way that the network is adapting today is really SD-WAN. So I would say SD-WAN is really an enabler for all these key things for the business. So it's really important to be efficient and be good at your transformation and adaptation on the network to actually speed up the conversion for your business into these new digital services. And because it's a large investment, because it's a lot of commitment, and because it has a lot of impact on your final ROI as a business and your final numbers, like your bottom line as a business, ensuring this quality of service and user experience is really a key thing for that you want to embrace, so that you don't miss all the good things that you can get by having access to all these new applications. And so Hawkeye really can be seen as an enabler of the enabler. Like SD-WAN is an enabler for your business, but Hawkeye is really an enabler of SD-WAN, making sure that it does everything, and it's not a problem, it's really a solution. So this is really the key takeaway is, if you're going through this transition, you're going to invest some time and money into transforming your network, invest maybe a bit more to make sure that it's really for the better.
And my two takeaways from the Keysight IT perspective, first, that Hawkeye is becoming our tool of choice for validating quality of service for real-time voice and video traffic, and also for critical enterprise applications in our new SD-WAN environment. And secondly, that Hawkeye, with its flexible distributed probes and ability to execute synthetic transactions, has provided Keysight IT the ability to more accurately capture end-user experience for the services we provide.
All right, great stuff, Nicolas and Joe. Those were some fantastic takeaways. Now we're going to open things up for questions. So if you have any burning questions for either of our two presenters, now's the time to ask. And to give everyone a chance to type out their questions, I'm going to go over some additional reading you'll find available under the resource list icon in the webinar console. First off, if you're looking to learn a little bit more about Hawkeye, our brand new product brief packs a ton of useful information into just 2 short pages. Think of it as a kind of crash course on Hawkeye, chock full of detailed feature descriptions as well as tangible use cases. Next up, we have the first of 2 white papers on SD-WAN monitoring. This one addresses 6 key considerations to ensure service resilience in virtual environments, as well as the importance of providing pervasive data access to the right tools at the right time. The second white paper we have available today is one of my favorites. And if you're looking to dive deeper into today's subject matter, you really owe it to yourself to check this one out. It's a detailed playbook that helps you better understand both the pre-deployment validation and post-deployment performance monitoring required to ensure a successful SD-WAN migration. And last, but certainly not least, we have a free 8-day trial of Hawkeye Express, a SaaS-based implementation of our active network monitoring platform. Now, I love reading product briefs and white papers as much as the next guy, but there's really nothing like getting your hands dirty and actually playing with a product. So whether you currently have a solution in place or not, it's a completely risk-free trial that's well worth investigating if you're serious about minimizing network outages while maximizing your network performance and user experience.
All right, now it's time for Q&A. A reminder to the audience that you could continue to type in your questions. We're receiving those on the back end. We had quite a number come through during the presentation, so we might not get to all of them. We will answer all questions via email after the event. So again, continue to send those questions in. If we don't get to them, we will after the event. So one of the first questions that came in, how is the user experience monitoring that your tool provides different from the metrics already available with SD-WAN solutions?
Okay, so that's actually a good question that we often get, and you have a lot of SD-WAN solutions out there, and all the vendors have some ways of providing insight of what's going on at their gateway level. So depending on the vendors, it would have different levels of information, and I want to say it's usually pretty rich in what sort of investigation you can make. Having said that, there are two things that it's missing, and it's usually because of it's not what they are supposed to be doing, these gateways. One is the end user perspective, like it's giving you a lot of insight about how it's connected and what are the counters and some of the quality of service of packets and so on, but it doesn't give you the end user perspective, like do I get a good connection to a service, like do I get good response time from Salesforce, do I get a good voice over IP connectivity from Minneapolis to London, and this is what Hawkeye is going to provide you, and it's going to be proactive at telling you this information and give you the end user perspective, like I do have a problem. Typically, the vendor solutions, they are very good dashboards for people that are trained to them. They are pretty complex, pretty deep dive, but they don't, alert you when something bad happens. So it's more like, use Hawkeye as a proactive detection mechanism. Like I do have a problem that I need to look at. So reduce the mean time to diagnose and to detect, I would say, and diagnose. And the vendor solution is really a good way to go and have the expert look in and understand what is the problem and take some proactive action. The other good thing with Hawkeye I would outline is that once the expert has been changing something or fixing something, whether it's rerouting or changing the traffic ruling, changing the application path or something, then Hawkeye can still do the testing and verify that it's fixed actually from the end user perspective. So it's kind of like a good way to do a fix and verify implementation.
Thank you. How long does it take to deploy?
So I did cover in my presentation that it was, we put a lot of attention on how the technology we provide to deploy our endpoints. So we have both software, virtual and hardware capabilities. So typically what we recommend is if you have a possibility to deploy your software or virtual solutions on site, prioritize that. And we have integration with some of the vendors, some of the switches or equipment that we are planning, and we're planning to extend that capabilities. But also you have sites where it's easy to deploy software because you have resources there. We also have hardware that you can ship easily. It's small form factor. It's really easy to ship or mail and deploy easily. So everything solution that we sell is kind of call home type of solution. You plug it and then it calls home and then it's all automatically manageable from a central location. So I would say it's difficult to say how long, but it's certainly a few days for several. Tens of sites rather than a few months. So of course, it will depend on the organization and the scope of coverage, but we're aiming to be as simple as possible, of course.
Great, thank you. And I like this next question, so thank you very much to Thomas for asking it. Generating synthetic traffic can create bottlenecks. Do you see any problem where the monitoring is actually causing more problems than solving?
Yeah, why don't I take that one from our experiences here in Keysight IT. For us, the answer is no. We've not seen any issues with traffic volumes with these synthetic transactions that Hawkeye generates. Even with those 25 voice transactions, we're running every 5 minutes at those 25 sites. It's still just a tiny fraction of the WAN bandwidth that we provision, which is for us in the range of tens to hundreds of megabits per second at each site. So no, we're not seeing any issue whatsoever with the transactions that Hawkeye generates. And we're very sensitive to that because we certainly don't want to be having our monitoring tools creating more problems than they're solving.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was on mute, so I apologize for that dead air time. And I'm just going to jump right back into the questions. You mentioned voice over IP. What about Skype for Business?
Oh, Skype for Business. Yeah, so we do a lot of voice and video, and obviously these are the key services that are really critical, especially when you move into non-SLA. So typically that's one of the most concerning services when you switch over to SD-WAN. So we have voice, video, different types, and we do also support unified communications, and Skype for Business is one of the most popular. We do actually have a certification from Microsoft for being able to assess Skype for Business, and looking at expanding that into Office 365, Team as well, services. So yes, we absolutely do Skype for Business, and can emulate any load volumes or bulk calls for Skype for Business.
Thank you. And it looks like we have time for one more question. We did have a lot come through, like I said. We unfortunately can't get to everyone's questions during this presentation, but we will get to those after the event. So if you have a question, please submit it and we will get back to you. So last question that we'll take during this presentation is there any integration with any SD-WAN vendor?
So not at this time. Just one of the reasons is that we want to be as much as we can vendor agnostic. So we really focused first on getting the end user experience. The one thing that we did though is explore ways we can actually add our technology on the same hardware, if you like, than some of the SD-WAN vendors. So we're doing integration based on containers or virtual machines, or even bare metal with some of the unified gateways, unified CPU, universal CPU is what I meant. So which support SD-WAN vendor solutions as well. And we also looking at, we have some requests from some of our customers to actually make some correlation. So we integrate with some correlation tools. So we feed our data, and this gets correlated with some of the SD-WAN vendor metrics, so that you can correlate events like bad user experience correlated with the some of the metrics that you collect on the SD-WAN vendor solution. So we're getting toward providing some integration, but we want to also keep our solution agnostic as well, so that it can run without actually being connected to SD-WAN vendors.
Thank you to our presenters for walking us through this topic and answering those questions. And a big thank you to our audience for joining us. If you want to see more content on this topic, you could visit the resource widget for the assets that Mike shared. You will also find a link to the slides from this event in that resource widget. And your thoughts are important to us, so please take a moment to give us some of your feedback by taking the survey. Lastly, please visit the Network Visibility webinar page, also in the resource widget, for a listing of our upcoming and on-demand network visibility webinars.